and welcome to another episode of Inside Outlook. And today I want to talk about stand-up comedy, specifically a comic named Patton Oswalt. I became interested in stand-up comedy around the year 2000, and that's when I saw my first live show. I went to see, the headliner was a comic named Tom Rhodes, who was still around. He never made it super famous. He was sort of on the cusp of fame in the 90s. He had a sitcom, but the sitcom was quickly canceled, and he was like the spokesperson for Comedy Central in the 90s. And he's all right. So he was the headliner. I just missed seeing Mitch Hedberg by a week. He was the comic right before Tom Rhodes. This was at the Laugh Stop in Houston, which was a famous stand-up club in the 80s and 90s. But it closed sometime in the early 2000s, I believe. So the first comic I actually saw was the opener, and that was Joey Diaz, who's he's semi-famous through Joe Rogan. He's a really good friend of Joe Rogan. He actually has some really funny stories, and his stand-up's okay, but his stories are really interesting sometimes. But when I saw him, he was about 100 pounds heavier than he is now. He was just talking about cocaine the entire time, and he was wanting to know where he could get some cocaine after the show, and he kind of came off as kind of scary. But so that's the first show I saw, and Tom Rhodes wasn't very memorable to me. The only thing I really remember about him is he said he was like the David Letterman of the Netherlands, because he had some show, some talk show in the Netherlands, but that was quickly canceled after I saw him. But it was still, I liked it. I liked the show, and then through my friends, I got interested in Bill Hicks, and that's what really made me a fan of stand-up comedy, because Bill Hicks is amazing. My friends were fans of band Tool, they were fans of Bill Hicks, and they put some of his material on one of their albums. And unfortunately, Bill Hicks, he died very early at age 32 of pancreatic cancer, but still, he put out a lot of material, and he's still my favorite. And I'll do an episode on him in the future. Now, even though I'm a fan of stand-up comedy, I haven't really seen that many live shows. I've only seen that one I described with Tom Rhodes, and then I saw Joe Rogan once before he was the host of Fear Factor at the time, and another friend of mine turned me on to him, and he had an album that had just come out called Shiny Happy Jihad. And it was a pretty good album. And that was before his podcast and before it blew up and he became like super famous. He was still semi-famous as like the host of Fear Factor. But anyway, I went to his show, and this was at the Houston Improv. It was really funny. I remember laughing really hard the whole time. But the thing about stand-up comedy is if you see it live, it's much funnier live. No matter what it is, it's always funnier live, because laughter is contagious and it's just in the air. And you can go see a show that just makes you barely be able to breathe with laughing, and you think you're like literally just gonna have like a heart attack or just not be able to breathe because you're laughing so hard. And then you go watch that exact same set at home by yourself, and you maybe laugh one time, or you're mostly just smiling. Really, being there live, it's a lot better. And the only other show I saw was a Doug Stanhope, who's another great comic. I saw him in probably around 2015. It was sort of like the venue, it was a little bit kind of hard to hear. It was like a club in San Marcos, Texas, and it didn't have the best acoustics, so I couldn't actually really hear what he was saying part of the time. But afterward, I bought one of his CDs and I got him to sign it. And I was talking to him for a few minutes because it was a small show. Even though Doug Stanhope's one of the best comics ever, it was just a small show. I got to talk to him for a few minutes, but I was trying to talk to him, but then like some girl came and jumped in his arms, and he kind of gave me the look like, hey, I'd love to keep talking to you, but, this girl wants my attention. But it was a really good experience. Sometimes it's like, it really helps with the down days. Like when you're having a really down day, those days where you're just depressed and you don't have really good reason, but you're just sort of staring off in the void, looking at the oblivion at the end of the universe. And sometimes, you can just take your favorite comedians and just put on some of their albums, watch some of their specials, and it makes you feel better. One of those comics I like to do that with is Patton Oswalt. Now, he's not my favorite comic, but he's a go-to whenever on those down days. Patton, he's pretty famous at this point. I mean, he's like in Hollywood. He does a lot of voice acting. He was on some sitcom for 9 years that I never even watched one episode because I think I watched a clip or here and there or something, but most sitcoms are just kind of bland, not my thing. I just mostly like him for the stand-up comedy, and he's a prolific stand-up comic. He's been around since 1988, and he didn't really even do his first TV special until 1997, and that was just a 30-minute HBO special, and it was good. I mean, he had like a decade to hone his best material, and it was it was like an HBO comedy half hour, and it was great. Then in 99, he did a Comedy Central special that was also really good. And then what I think is his best comedy set ever was the album. It's an album called 222. Not the best name ever for an album. And the 222 album is 2.5 hours. It's just an uncut where he just does all his material 2.5 hours straight, and it's great. You just need something to take your mind off things. It's just, you can throw on that album and it's 2.5 hours. And it always makes me laugh, and it's great stuff. And that came out in 2003. I think it was recorded a little earlier. Patton Oswalt, like, sometimes he does political humor. He's a little political, but his political bits are never really very good, and he doesn't do that much of it. So if you don't like his politics, it doesn't matter. He's a comic, he's funny, don't worry about that. So there's that album, and then he cut that album and he put like an abridged version of it called Feeling Kinda Patton, and I don't recommend that because it's the same thing. It's just, so unless you can't find 222 anywhere, and also he did a video special called No Reason to Complain, which I think came out in like 2006, but it's just him cannibalizing the 222 album again. So you also don't really need that, you just need the 222 special. And then between 2007 and 2022, he put out 8 specials. 1 album and 7 video specials, and so he's got a lot of material. Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, the specials get kind of progressively worse as they go. Like, I think all the earlier stuff is better, but that doesn't mean that it's not good. It's just, I think the earlier stuff's better. It doesn't mean the later stuff is bad. Although his latest 2 specials, I don't think is up to par with his other material, especially the very latest one called We All Scream. I just don't think that's a good special. I'm sorry to say. When I tell you about Patton Oswalt, don't rush to go watch his latest special and then be like, hey, you told me he was good. Like, what happened? I think that's his worst one. So you really got to go to the earlier stuff if you want to enjoy his comedy. Some people might like it. Some people might like the later stuff better. That's just, it's all subjective. That's his stand-up comedy. And like I said, all the Hollywood stuff, the movies, that's other stuff. But that's not what I'm interested in. He also wrote 2 books. Now, these books are short books, they're memoirs. But I wouldn't recommend them unless you're just a giant Patton Oswalt fan. So I've read both of these memoirs, and I would give his first one, Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, a B rating on an A+ to F scale. And I'd give his second one, called Silver Screen Fiend, C+. More about Patton. So he was married to his first wife. She was a serial killer researcher. She was writing a book on the Golden State Killer, and this was before he was identified. And she was writing a book trying to, basically, she was sort of on the hunt for this guy, trying to track him down, trying to figure out who he was. But unfortunately, she died at age 46. It was a prescription drug overdose. I think she had Xanax and some kind of opioid mix. She was had insomnia, so she wasn't getting much sleep. Coroner also said she had some kind of heart problem as well. So, but just a combination of bad things that happened to her. So there's a documentary about her and about her search for the Golden State Killer, and Patton Oswalt's involved in it, and it's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It's a pretty good documentary. I would recommend that even if you're not a Patton Oswalt fan. It's interesting. She's interesting, and I kind of feel like she's a kindred spirit, and she had depression. That's why she was medicating. And now he's remarried. With his first wife, he had a daughter, and now he's remarried, and they seem, the daughter, the new wife, they all seem like they're happy. So I'm happy for him again. So what you need to do is listen to the 222 album. Yeah, and also just I'd start with his earlier stuff and just see how, and just go from there. But he's got a lot of specials. If you're not into stand-up comedy, there's also a lot of bad stand-up comedy, and there's a lot of it now. I mean, when I started listening, there's only so much, but now it's just flooded. Everyone wants to be a stand-up comic, and like everyone's putting out their specials, but still, it's not easy to be good. And Patton Oswalt, I would say, is really good, and especially his early stuff. That's my recommendation, and thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, disagreements, let me know in the comments. And please like and subscribe, and thank you.